Hey there friends, I've got another props from the past for you. We're going back only 4 years now to a project I made for a costume, a Star Wars themed costume, my Han Solo belt. Super proud of this one because I used real leather and real metal. It felt really good to wear. I still have it, although it's at the shop, not here at home. Otherwise I'd show you, but we'll see it on the video. So let's dive right in, see what Bill from 2016 has to say about making a Han Solo belt.
Greetings fellow makers, I'm Bill and today I'm going to show you how I made my Han Solo blaster holster. This is the Force Awakens version of Han Solo's holster that I made for my costume that I wore at Emerald City Comic Con. The first thing
I also did not make the jacket, that Han Solo jacket. I might have that. That's probably at the shop too. I bought that. That was a birthday present to myself. It was quite expensive. It was custom made and it fit me really well. It doesn't fit me really well anymore, but maybe it will in the future.
What I want to point out before we get started is this is a first try. This was an excuse for me to learn a little bit of working with aluminum and a little bit of working with some leather. So I know for sure I did a whole bunch of things wrong, but more on that later. Let's get on.
I think I actually brought that to Georgia and had my friend Kathy help me upgrade it. Kathy from God Save the Queen Fashions. I believe I made a video of that too.
On with the build, I started by patterning my buckle, belt, and holster using plastic, EVA foam, and paper. In fact, you can see a video of that process. I'll have that linked down below. I started by constructing the buckles. These were made from 1/8 inch thick aluminum sheets. I transferred the patterns to the metal and cut out all of the parts using a metal cutting blade on my bandsaw.
The metal, the aluminum, I purchased from a local supplier, a big metal warehouse. And I didn't need very much. Obviously I needed like this much. And they had a cutoffs room where you could buy basically scrap. They did have an amount you had to buy. I think it was like $35 worth of stuff. I bought 5 sheets of aluminum. They're about yay big. I think they were like $5 each. I still have 4.75 sheets of that aluminum. So it lasted me a really long time and will continue to last me.
Some of these parts required a little bit of drilling and a scroll saw to cut out the interior slots for the belt. The same was done to create the keyhole slots for buckling the belt together. Again, I drilled some holes, just this time I used a smaller hole and a bigger hole, and then I connected them using that scroll saw. Then I had to do a whole bunch of cleanup work so that these looked all nice and pretty. Mostly I used the belt sander for this, but other parts were tidied up by hand using some needle files and sandpaper. This made the belt slots nice and smooth.
So aluminum, a lot of people who work with it, who are also woodworkers, kind of treat aluminum like just a slightly harder wood. In fact, we like to call it shiny wood. And you can use woodworking tools on aluminum for the most part. Don't use your good chisels. Or don't use someone else's good chisels anyway. But yeah, that's why we call aluminum shiny wood. I probably did put a metal cutting blade in the scroll saw, or at least a finer tooth blade in the scroll saw. That probably helped.
And it helped make sure the keyholes would perfectly accept the machine screws for the buckle attachment. To attach those machine screws to the metal, I drilled in several holes in my
I didn't own a center punch at that point.
Those holes were threaded using a tap, making a perfect threaded hole to attach my screws to the buckle. To cover those screw holes, I cut out a couple of matching plates that would go on top of the functional buckle plate.
I feel like I made this more complicated than I had to.
On top of the back
but it
plates,
worked.
Covering all the screw holes using a quick setting JB weld. This is a 2-part glue specifically designed for gluing metal together. When the glue was
I love that stuff. I use it all the time.
To the disc sander and sanded the edges flush. Finally, all of the buckle parts were screwed together using a little bit of Loctite glue to ensure that the machine screws wouldn't come loose. The screws were also added to the back plate so that the keyholes on the buckles could just barely slide into them, providing a secure yet removable connection. Before we get onto the leather parts of this build, I need
the drilling and tapping metal to make like real mechanical connections like that, I think will always be satisfying to me. Just knowing, now I've never had to take that belt apart, but knowing that I could just makes me feel good.
to pause for a moment and thank our patrons. You guys have been supporting us over the years, and we
Look at that, you guys.
More thankful. We couldn't be doing all of these videos without your help. If
You're so
new to
right,
the channel
Bill.
and you would like to help support us as well, you can head on over to patreon.com/punishedprops and consider throwing a little bit of coin our way. Patrons get access
Which you
to an
guys have,
exclusive tip every
and we
single
thank
week.
you so
And
much.
I just started doing a regular vlog.
Sweet hair,
that is,
Bill.
again, just exclusive to Patreon.
That's what I
And
say now.
finally, I'm adding a really cool new feature. This will allow you guys to vote on upcoming projects and videos.
Never actually did
all
that.
Of this stuff
Or I
is
did it, but I
accessed
never
through
did finish the project.
/punishedprops. It's a great way for you guys to help support
I'll
our
have to talk
channel
about that someday, what
and
happened with that
for
project.
you guys to give us a bunch of insight, get some extra tips, and help us with future builds.
I'm
Thanks
sold,
again,
Bill. I'll
and
support you.
Back to the build. With my patterns in hand, I bought enough leather to make all of the belt and holster parts. The straps were pretty easy, just a bunch of long strips of cowhide. These were cut to length, and then I punched a bunch of holes for assembling and sizing the belt to the buckles. The large hole.
This is where mocking everything up in foam was so handy. I just used 2mm foam. A little thicker would have been better, but this is 2016. We didn't have the range of foam thicknesses available that we do now. So I mocked it all up in 2mm, and I could sort of mock up where these holes would go so I have a good range so I could adjust the size. And but it got me really close because I could test it and literally wear it on me as foam and plastic before committing to expensive leather.
The holster portion was traced onto the leather and also cut out. This big weird shape required me to buy a large chunk of leather, and I only had one shot at it. No pressure, Bill. The part that actually holds the gun was intentionally cut big. You can always cut.
We also did a video with Bjorn from Bjorn's Workshop where we just way deep dive into leathercraft, and a lot of these techniques get covered in far more detail. So if you are interested in learning more about leather, you'll want to go check out that video. This is really more of a cursory glance, and I've learned so much since then.
Cut more off, but you can't add leather back on. To stitch the edges of the holster together, I punched a crap load of holes in the edge, and then I used some barge cement to glue it all together, and then I stitched it up using some thread, making a really nice...
After doing that little workshop with Bjorn, I'm realizing that I probably did this all in the wrong order. So don't follow this video for leathercraft. Again, follow the other one with the expert.
Nice and pretty seam. Then I wet molded the holster to the gun prop. Now in hindsight, I should have done this before stitching the edges of that piece together. In fact, the holster ended up being way too big. Not a problem, again, I can always remove material. So I traced a new edge on the holster, and then I actually used my bandsaw to trim off that extra leather. It was pretty easy. Then I punched, glued, and stitched it all up again. I also drew on...
Tell you what, those are the lessons that stick. Those are the ones that stay. When you have to like redo 100 holes or something, you're like, let's make sure we don't goof that up again.
Cut out for the gun to slide into. This was trimmed out using a very sharp knife. I also added a strap to the holster. This was attached using rivets, and this was used to hold the gun in place. To snap it closed, I used snaps. Go figure. Another strap was added to the main holster part to snap it around my leg. And then finally, the two holster parts could be attached. They were glued, riveted, and stitched together. With all of the leather parts finished, they were given a lovely color with a leather dye.
I'm sure this is something many people do, but when I brush leather dye on, it tends to get spotty. I know you gotta be like quick, and I don't have a lot of practice doing it, but the airbrush, lots of practice getting nice even layers of color with the airbrush, and that worked really well on this one.
Applied the dye using an airbrush, and I think it turned out really nice.
Me too.
I like using the airbrush because I can apply more dye in other areas if I'd like them to have a little bit more of a rich color.
Yeah, doing some
the leather parts all
some
finished
shading.
up, I could attach them to the belt buckles. The straps were attached to the belt buckle using some pop rivets. This attached them to the metal bits permanently.
Man, that looks good.
The rest of the belt straps on the back were attached using machine screws and some of those threaded holes. This would allow me to take them apart if I needed to adjust the sizing. The buckles.
I do remember that that fitting system was a little janky. I think maybe if the holes I punched in the leather were a little bigger, had a little more wiggle room, that probably would have helped. Getting the machine screw threaded through 2 pieces of leather and then into the threads is a pain. So I think bigger holes in the leather would have helped.
For the holster, we're attached using Chicago screws. These look really pretty, and they also allow me to take the straps apart, again, if I need to adjust the sizing.
I haven't yet, but I also haven't tried it on in a while.
Those final additions made this a fully functional and legit belt. While I am pretty happy with how this thing turned out, I need you guys to keep in mind a couple of things. This was one of my first times using aluminum, and also one of my first times using leather. I am fully aware of the finishing touches it still needs. The edges of the leather need a good burnishing, which I got a lesson in from my pal Kathy over at God Save the Queen Fashions the last time I stopped by her shop. So I'll be adding that detail to this belt in the future. I also know that Han Solo's belt has a bunch more stuff on it, and again, I'll be adding those as time goes on. I also think
I haven't added anything. I haven't worn my Han Solo costume in years, and again, it's probably because the jacket's a little tight.
Need to adjust the color a little bit. I think in the movie it's a little bit darker of a shade of leather dye, so I can always add that again later on. Again though, I'm really happy with it turned out. It feels great to wear. It's got that nice authentic weight to it, and it's incredibly durable.
Yeah, so many costume pieces when I put them on. During the day I'm like shifting and readjusting the nylon webbing or whatever. This thing, click it on, it's just a belt, stays on you no problem. Doesn't stretch or anything, and it just feels good to walk around in it.
Thank you guys so much for checking out this fun, awesome Star Wars build. If you like this one, obviously you should go watch the patterning video that we did.
Oh, I did a whole bunch. The patterning one, the Han Solo blaster video, and then we did a video where I gave away a bunch of Ray blasters at Emerald City Comic Con to Ray cosplayers dressed as Han Solo, and that was really fun. All great things to check out, by the way.
I also have a video on how I painted this gun from a really, really cheap toy. And of course, you really ought to go watch the video from Emerald City Comic Con where I dressed up as Han Solo and gave out a bunch of blasters.
That's Pat
to a bunch
Dooley.
Of cosplayers.
I know Pat,
that was really
and
fun.
she provided the best.
If you're new to the channel, of
best
course,
reaction.
you really ought to subscribe. We're climbing really close to 100,000 subscribers. We're going to do something really fun for that milestone once we get there. So please subscribe. Check out some of our old videos and give making stuff a try.
Yeah.
I really want to see you guys giving this stuff a go because it's an awful lot of fun. Now,
Sure
if you'll
is.
Excuse me, I gotta go see my pal Greedo. We have a couple things to talk about.
That's great. That was so much fun. Man, that was right when we were hitting 100,000 subscribers 4 years ago, and now we're at 600 something. Boy, how time flies. Thank you guys so much for taking that trip down memory lane with me. I'm both impressed with how well the project turned out, and it's great to learn or figure out how much I've learned since then, especially when getting to talk to people like Kathy and Bjorn, who have put in a lot of hours learning leathercraft and getting to feed that direct knowledge right out of their brain. So yeah, check those videos out on the main channel if you haven't seen them already, because they're a lot of fun, especially if you want to get into leathercraft. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and as always, thank you so much for the support. It means the world to us, helping us keep going during all of the, global pandemic. It's been really fantastic. We'll have more for you next week. Looking forward to sharing it with you, and I hope you have a pretty good weekend. Okay, take care, you guys. We'll see you later.